She's not worthy. The Republicans shouldn't do this. When you see her take all these hours of questioning, you say to yourself, oops, she is qualified. 15 million have already voted in Georgia. 11 hours people waited at some point just to vote. People are determined. Today, the president determined. He's going to have a speech at 1 o'clock in Greenville, at the airport, Greenville, North Carolina.
North Carolina. Don't go to Greenville, South Carolina.
Right. Don't do that. And at the airport. And the vice president is going to be in Miami, Florida. So they are going hard, and the president will be at that his own town hall tonight.
Right, and exactly.
Right.
Meanwhile, Griff Jenkins is live in Washington, where a Senate investigation is underway into Hunter Biden's business dealings, because they got an exclusive yesterday, Griff, that essentially said that Hunter Biden got money for providing access to his father, who was at the time the vice president.
That's right, Steve. Brian Ainsley, good morning to you. Stunning revelation stemming from the New York Post reporting in the president, who will leave here a little after 11 o'clock today to head to North Carolina, last night at a rally was saying he wants answers and he wants them now. Listen.
We've just learned through explosive documents published by a very fine newspaper, the New York Post, that Joe Biden has been blatantly lying about his involvement in his son's corrupt business dealing. And this is a big smoking gun.
Now, let's lay this out a little bit. According to emails obtained by the New York Post, Hunter Biden was allegedly in communication with a top advisor to the Ukrainian firm Burisma, where he was paid to sit on the board. It was about securing a meeting with his family, who was vice president at the time. As the firm was under investigation, the executive wrote this in 2015. Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to D.C. and giving an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. A year earlier, 2014, he wrote, we urgently need your advice on how you could use your influence to convey a message, signal, etc., to stop what we consider to be politically motivated actions. The information was discovered by a blind owner of a computer repair shop in Delaware, who claims Hunter Biden brought his computer in for service in 2019, but never picked it up once he found the information on the hard drive. The owner says he turned it into the FBI. He spoke to reporters yesterday. Have a listen.
Is there any thought in your mind that this might not have been Hunter's and might have been somebody trying to set Hunter up?
No.
Okay.
No.
The Biden campaign is responding, blasting the report, issuing a statement saying, quote, we have reviewed Joe Biden's official schedules from the time, and no meeting, as alleged by the New York Post, ever took place. But the Senate Homeland Security Committee, led by Senator Ron Johnson, is investigating, looking into the validity of the emails. And there's more reporting this morning at 5 a.m. from the New York Post.
Which is, they're reporting that he basically did the same thing in China with his business partners. They're reporting that Hunter Biden introduced his dad, who was vice president at the time, to his business partners in China. They flew over to China together on Air Force Two in December of 2013, according to these reports. What do you think about the censorship 3 weeks from the election?
I think the mainstream media is entirely in bed with Joe Biden. I think their only priority is trying to elect Biden. And big tech, look, big tech has been getting worse and worse and worse, but they really crossed a line here. They crossed a line that is very dangerous. For years, I've been focusing on big tech censorship of conservatives, of conservative ideas, of shadow banning. I've chaired multiple hearings on it. But the line they crossed here is the New York Post has the 4th highest circulation in America. They did 2 things on this. Number one, they blocked all of their users. If you wanted to share this story from the New York Post, you clicked on the link and you went up to a page that said blocked. This information is dangerous. Well, maybe it's dangerous for Biden's political fortunes, but that's not really Twitter and Facebook's call to make. And then secondly, the New York Post itself was sending out on Facebook and Twitter their own story, and they blocked the Post. They blocked the Post from sending it. I don't know of any precedent of a major news outlet being blocked by Twitter and Facebook, of them deciding the following news outlets are not allowed to report major evidence of corruption from one of the 2 presidential candidates a couple of weeks before the election. It is stunning. And for everyone in the media who says, well, it's unverified. You know, that didn't stop the New York Times from going on and on and on with what they say are the president's tax returns. And it certainly didn't stop a whole lot of blue checkmark journalists from talking about the Steele dossier and the so-called P-tape Now, that is unverified. In this case, I don't know if the New York Post story is right or not, but that's actually what people should be debating, and Joe Biden ought to be answering those questions right now.
And they said there was some personal information, personal emails, and contacts on there. That was it. So they do this thing called redaction. I think America's got great at redaction. We're the best redactors in the world. We redact everything of substance. I think we could have adjusted that. But the other thing to keep in mind, it's working. Because not everybody gets the New York Post since New York. And there's a lot of people out there who aren't watching us, even as astounding as that is. And the networks don't cover it. The other channels don't cover it. It's not brought up by the Biden campaign. So it is working. You guys do an investigation in November or December, fireworks. It's a day story. It is working. But so that's why it's a frustrating situation. If George Stephanopoulos is worth anything as an anchor, he will bring this up tonight with a follow-up, correct?
He certainly should. I will say I'm not holding my breath. You know, Savannah Guthrie in the Today Show ought to be losing their mind, because if this is true, Joe Biden looked her in the eyes and just flat out lied to her. Just lied to her. If you watch the video, she ought to be really ticked off. A journalist has a right to be upset if a politician, particularly a nominee to be president of the United States, just flat out lies. And if NBC isn't pursuing this, shame on them that they're not even pretending to be journalists.
Well, the last couple of days we've watched you on TV during the Senate confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett. And so, you know, we're going to have a little flashback to something that was said yesterday. It's your colleague across the aisle, Chris Coons, the Democrat from Delaware. And essentially, he was asking her, would she be an Antonin Scalia clone when it came to deciding issues? And here's the back and forth. Watch this.
If Justice Scalia had had his way, we'd be in a very different country with regards to gender discrimination in one of Justice Ginsburg's most celebrated decisions in 1996, in the case involving Virginia Military Institute. I'm just getting at how closely you would ally yourself with Justice Scalia's jurisprudence.
I do share Justice Scalia's approach to text, originalism and textualism. But in the litany of cases that you've just identified, I hope that you aren't suggesting that I don't have my own mind, or that I couldn't think independently, or that I would just decide, like, oh, let me see what Justice Scalia has said about this in the past, because I assure you I have my own mind.
Senator, what was Senator Coons trying to do, and what did she do?
Well, look, they tried to throw some rocks at Judge Barrett. I will say the big news out of yesterday is that the Democrats surrendered. They've given up. By midday, they were all gone. The hearing room was empty. There were 2 Democrats in the entire hearing room. And I think they recognize that on the merits, her credentials are impeccable. They don't have any questions that are moving the ball. She's going to be confirmed. And, you know, it's interesting, that exchange where Chris Coons, he talks generally about equal rights, but he doesn't get into any specifics. Yesterday, when I was questioning Judge Barrett, I walked through all of the cases at the court that are hanging in the balance 5-4. As you know, these are all the cases that I talk about in my new book, One Vote Away. Going through free speech, our rights to criticize our politicians, to talk about public issues, hanging in the balance 5-4. Religious liberty, our rights to worship according to our faith, according to our conscience, 5-4. The Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. The radicals the left wants to put on the court, they have 4 votes for essentially erasing the Second Amendment from the Bill of Rights. And I'll tell you, it is very revealing that not a single one of the Democrats wants to debate the merits or substance of that. They know that their radical agenda for the court is really unpopular. And so instead, they want to talk about different topics. They don't want to talk about packing the court, which I also believe is part of their agenda if they win, increasing the number of justices from 9 to 11 or 13 to try to immediately politicize the court. That's a wildly unpopular idea, but I think it's where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are right now.
Yeah, well, the polls show that Biden is ahead. If they do win, if Biden and Harris win in 19 days, then what happens with court packing after that? That's the next fight. You're warning America about that.
That is exactly right. You know, it was interesting this week. We saw the Democrats trying to redefine what court packing means. And it was a very concerted effort. Their talking points, they've got a lot of message discipline. What they're trying to say is, well, you know, Republicans have been packing the court for 4 years. No, that's not actually what court packing means. Court packing does not mean nominating a justice to fill a vacancy. That's the ordinary course. That's what all presidents do. That's what happens. Court packing is very different. It is expanding the number of justices. FDR tried it in 1937 at the height of his power. He wanted to increase the Supreme Court from 9 justices to 15. His own party, the Democratic Party, said no and resisted him because they said it would destroy the independence of the court. It would politicize the court. The FDR was wrong then. The Democrats were right then. You know, Joe Biden in 1983 said court packing was a boneheaded idea. And now that boneheaded idea, I think, is their agenda number 1 if they win on Election Day.
And they won't tell you, which shows that they know it's unpopular, but they're going to do it. Senator Schumer says everything's on the table, so don't let him deny that it's not. And number 3 is Bernie Sanders might have lost the nomination, but he is going to have the purse strings. He's going to be ahead of the Budget Committee if you guys lose majority in the Senate. He's going to have more power in many cases than the President of the United States. People should understand holistically what's at stake this election. Senator, thanks so much. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much. And the book was #1 bestseller on Amazon nationally, so go get it where you get books.
Right. Absolutely. I'm not saying he's a competitive guy, but
Wait, you and Steve released it on the same day, right?
And actually, Steve, your cookbook, which is selling like great, our books have been trading places for #1 back and forth. So congratulations. Bundle them together. Get Steve's cookbook and one vote away. They make a great package, great Christmas gifts.
You know, and the brilliance of your book, Senator, was that meatloaf recipe in Chapter 8.
Right.
And your discussion of the Second Amendment, you know, right between tacos was very helpful.
I couldn't help it.
Yeah, take that, Bob Woodward.
That's right. We're beating both of us are beating him right now. Anyway,
that's
I'm
true.
surrounded by all these smart men. Congratulations, all of y'all. #1.
All right. Meanwhile, straight ahead on this Thursday, one of our top stories for 2 days now, bombshell allegations against Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, getting 0 coverage in the network newscast last night. 0 on all 3. So can we expect Joe Biden to be pressed on the issue when he and President Trump take part in dueling town halls tonight? Fox News analyst Lawrence Jones joins us right now, and there finally is the graphic. Lawrence, 0 time on the networks last night. So do you think George Stephanopoulos is going to ask Joe Biden about these allegations in the New York Post, even though his own network didn't even cover it last night on the nightly news?
I think the potential of him glossing over it is pretty high. Look, I think this goes back to the utter disdain for their audience. All of these guys have political affiliations, and this is why they can't do accurate reporting. I'm not saying that the allegations are true because I don't know. Right. But I do know there's a lot of smoke there, and it's their job to go after the truth. But I think because of these guys are so politically tied, and it's the fourth quarter of this political election, they're afraid that it may hurt their candidate. And that's just not serving their audience. The fact that there was not alarms ringing from the press that Facebook and Twitter were suppressing the First Amendment when it came down to journalism, when they know good and well that they publish stories with unnamed sources every single day, is just stunning to me. So, again, don't be surprised when this happens to your report, since you didn't speak up for a publication that you don't like. But they did actual reporting. They had a lot of sourcing in it. They provided documents. They provided pictures. And so the fact that they won't defend this report is stunning to me.
Well, but what about the fact that Twitter and Facebook both said, we're not going to allow people to share the link to the New York Post stories. And in fact, they've frozen, I think, the New York Post whole account as well on Twitter. So people are, rather than read the story and you decide for yourself, because they tell exactly the chronology of the events that led up to them winding up with this information. But instead of letting people do that, they're just saying, nope, we're going to be the judge for you.
Yeah, meanwhile, in the mission statement of Twitter, they said that their mission is to let information go without barriers, and they are definitely putting up barriers. Look, I think it's pretty sad. I'm a libertarian. I believe that private businesses should be able to conduct themselves the way they want to conduct themselves. Right. But these people aren't acting like they said they were going to act. And the fact that they're selectively deciding what stories can be published, I think is concerning for all Americans. This is a lot of shady stuff that's going on. And I think it may have to do with former communications director of Kamala Harris being on their communication staff, the director of communication. All of these.
Oh, come on, Lawrence. That's a coincidence.
Well, you know, I don't think so. So, again, look, it's not my job to take teams when it comes to political candidates. At the end of the day, I'm honest with this audience. They know I'm a libertarian, but they know I'm going to go out there every single day and provide analysis on what I see on the ground. This is not what these reporters are doing. So I just hope George Stephanopoulos starts to ask some questions. Maybe we can get to the bottom of this, but this non-answer I don't think is going to fly with American voters.
Well, you mentioned it's not your job. You know what your job is? To talk to the people. You were in Des Moines last night talking to the people at a Trump rally, and we've got some highlights. Watch this.
Judge Barrett, she wants to be on the Supreme Court. She's going through a tough hearing right now. Do you think she's been treated fairly?
No, however, she's holding her own, and she's doing a great job. So we're real proud of her.
She is so amazing. It's like they keep trying to trip her up, and they just can't.
She has an intellect like no other, probably one of the smartest people that's ever going to come into the Supreme Court. So I don't really think she's fazed by any of the questions she was asked.
What do you think happens at the end of the day? Do you think she gets confirmed?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, it looks like Amy Coney Barrett has a lot of fans last night, but then again, they're fans of the president, so that made sense.
Well, as you know, Steve, 48% of voters now are saying that they think she should be confirmed. 31% believe that she shouldn't, but that's a 17-point spread, as well as 2%. That's up 2% from last week. So, again, what are the people saying? They want her to be confirmed.
All right, let's see what happens. There's another day of testimony. She, however, will not be in the hot seat in 34 minutes. Lawrence, thank you very much. Good job in Iowa yesterday. Check him out over on Fox Nation with One Nation. Lawrence Jones. Very good. Meanwhile, still ahead on this Thursday, a Democratic senator criticizing Judge Amy Coney Barrett for using a particular phrase.
I have never discriminated on the basis of sexual preference.
Their sexual preference is an offensive and outdated term.
Tammy Bruce on the language police coming up next.
If Justice Scalia had his way, we'd be in a very different country with regards to gender discrimination in one of Justice Ginsburg's most celebrated decisions in 1996 in the case involving Virginia Military Institute. I'm just getting at how closely you would ally yourself with Justice Scalia's jurisprudence.
I do share Justice Scalia's approach to text, originalism and textualism. But in the litany of cases that you've just identified, I hope that you aren't suggesting that I don't have my own mind, or that I couldn't think independently, or that I would just decide, like, oh, let me see what Justice Scalia has said about this in the past, because I assure you I have my own mind.
In day 3 of her confirmation hearing, Judge Amy Coney Barrett found herself not answering for her own record, but for that of her mentor, the late Justice Antonin Scalia. And joining us now to discuss this, Fox News contributor and Independent Woman's Voice president is Tammy Bruce. Hey, Tammy, good to see you. What was your top?
Ainsley, good morning.
Good morning. What was your favorite thing?
Well, my favorite thing there's a couple moments like that where it's very remarkable for Americans to see, and especially for girls and young women to see, is the ability to stand up for yourself, defend yourself without being defensive, be firm without being aggressive or mean. I mean, it's a remarkable style of a woman who it's about self-confidence. It's about owning the nature of what it is you're going to say, that whatever it is someone says to you does not really even offend you because you know who you are. We haven't seen that in a very long time in that kind of an environment. So it's quite remarkable. We also saw it in some exchanges with Senator Harris. We saw it in an exchange even with Lindsey Graham when he was also asking her about Justice Scalia. And she said at one point, another favorite was, you know, you're going to be getting Justice Barrett, not Justice Scalia. But it's also a concern, Ainsley, in that, look, we still need to see more women in positions of power, clearly. But the more that we see, the more we see an expanse of the kinds of women who can be powerful. And yet we still kind of see women as inheritors of the men who influence them, inheritors of power, inheritors of ideas. It's very exciting when you see a woman being able to have a mentor, just like men do, and yet expected of themselves and by other people to have their own ideas, to be able to move forward and beyond that. And that's what she's accomplishing, and it's very exciting.
All right, so Tammy, another topic making headlines is the exchange between Mazie Hirono, Senator Hirono, and the judge about the judge using the phrase sexual preference. Watch this.
I have never discriminated on the basis of sexual preference.
Sexual preference is an offensive and outdated term.
So Merriam-Webster, the dictionary, here's the old definition versus the new definition of sexual preference. Before it said orientation, sense, sexual preference. And now, after that exchange between the two of them on Tuesday, now it says offensive, sense, sexual preference. What's your response?
It's really dumb, and that's one of the problems with, the online framework. Before, you would have a team of people who would make decisions about definitions, because that's very important. This started, I believe, when some expert blue check on Twitter made that point, which is idiotic. Let me just tell you, as a gay woman, many of in the audience may not know that I am. For me, it is a preference. For others, they would identify it as being an orientation. What's remarkable here is that you've got that, and preference, by the way, had been approved and okay up until maybe, the day before yesterday. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has used it. Joe Biden has used it as a phrase, and there was no problem there. But what's ironic here is that anyone from the gay community would throw in a dash of Stalin when it comes to policing the words we can use. All the civil rights movements were about being able to define ourselves, to live lives that best suited us. And they are the last people who should be punishing people or determining as the adjective police what it is we can use. And that's, I think, the danger, is that you've got now this clamp trying to make it seem as though either everyone's homophobic or you've got to be careful with every word. Maybe we need to have a list on our fridges that are tacked up, written in pencil, of course, with the day-to-day changes about what's okay with definitions, especially coming from the side of politics who say that there are at least a dozen genders. So don't look at, for anybody to complain about any heterosexual or homosexual who is going to identify as, let's say, as a preference. That is the case sometimes, and we're not homophobes or hostile to the gay agenda. That's bunk. And I think it's important for people to realize that. But this is part of the technique of making people afraid and sending a signal that someone like Judge Barrett is an immoral individual. And of course, that's a lie.
So this is the statement from Merriam-Webster. Our scheduled updates, which add new words and also add new definitions, take place several times per year. In this case, we released the update for sexual preference when we noticed that the entries for preference and sexual preference were being consulted in connection with the SCOTUS hearings. As always, all revisions reflect evidence of use. Are you satisfied with that?
Yeah. No, not at all. They felt the heat. It's an excuse. It's certainly not a coincidence, and it's something that they've got to realize. They're not going to let some blue check one guy on Twitter or others who then parrot him determine what's offensive and what isn't. From this woman who identifies with my homosexuality as a sexual preference, how dare anyone suggest that that's offensive because somebody on the left doesn't like it? That is unacceptable on any term, in any section of life, and they need to know that. Let's go back to, as opposed to judgment in the definition of words, to placing it out there like you guys have been talking with the New York Post story. Let people decide. We can have the public conversation, but they can keep their dictionary as basic as they possibly can.
Tammy, thank you for being on with us. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ainsley.
You're welcome. 8:37 here on the East Coast. President Trump calling on Joe Biden to release all records about his son Hunter's business dealings after leaked emails link him to Burisma. Trey Gowdy says Joe Biden needs to give answers now, and he joins us next. But first, our
Vice President Biden, you owe the people of America an apology because it turns out you are a corrupt politician. The Biden family treated the vice presidency as a for-profit corporation flying around the globe, collecting millions of dollars from China and Ukraine and Russia and other countries. He lied to you over and over because he's trying to cover up a massive pay-for-play scandal at the heart of his vice presidency.
And then the word went out, the president was going to change his speech. He was going to lead with the New York Post story. As we welcome in Trey Gowdy. Trey, has changed again, 5 a.m. this morning Eastern time. Another chapter, because we get more emails with the link to his dealings in China. Direct emails and a reference to big guy. Many people think it's the vice president. You are the author, Trey Gowdy, of book Doesn't Hurt to Ask, using the power of questions to communicate, connect, and persuade. And what did I ask you in the break right before? What are the questions you have after reading these 2 days of stories?
Well, there are two categories. There's relevance, and then there's the reaction. First, relevance. You know, Joe Biden said he never discussed foreign business with his son. Never is a really big word, Brian. It covers a long period of time. Never is big. So if he did discuss it with his son, then his credibility is impeached, and that's legitimately questioned and should be questioned. Even if he didn't discuss business, let's assume arguendo he told the truth and he never discussed business with his son. Well, his son is out there trafficking in his father's name and reputation, making lots of money. Wouldn't you want to know that? So the relevance, there's also the issue of the authenticity of the underlying information. I mean, we're assuming the information is authentic. The FBI could answer that before the end of this segment if they wanted to.
They have the laptop.
And then you've got the reaction. They've got the laptop. Ron Johnson has the information, but I don't think Senator Johnson is equipped to determine the authenticity of the underlying information. The FBI, which works for the executive branch, which the president heads, could tell us before the end of this segment whether or not those emails are authentic and reliable or not.
And, you know, the other thing, Congressman, is if the FBI's got the laptop and supposedly somebody who identified themselves as Hunter Biden dropped it off at the Mac Fix-It shop there in Delaware, the FBI, I'm sure, has looked at the outside. They've figured out whose fingerprints are on the outside. And if you're suggesting that the FBI, at the direction of the president, could release that?
Well, they could certainly tell us whether or not there's any reason to suspect this is Russian disinformation, which is always the left's argument. If the emails are authentic, then there is potential criminality under lobbying registration acts. But I mean, the FBI is not supposed to get involved in politics. That's hard for us to believe after 2016, but they're really not supposed to. Right. But if the information is reliable, then the media provides the non-criminal oversight in our culture. Right. And I've seen no stories. There have been more stories about whether Kamala Harris saw the fly on Mike Pence's head than whether or not Hunter Biden was trafficking in his father's name and influence.
So this is the front cover of the Post this morning. I don't know if you can see it, but it says censored on the front. If you open it up, there's a story about Kayleigh McEnany. She has a personal Twitter account. She posted that story from yesterday about Ukraine and Hunter and Joe Biden, and her account was locked. And they wrote on there, we have determined that this account violated the Twitter rules. And then it gives the definition of the rule. Jack Dorsey, they defended it. Twitter defended it earlier on in the day, saying that blocking any links or they were blocking links or images to the story. But Jack Dorsey, the CEO, said later in the day, our communication around our actions on the New York Post article was not great. Blocking the URL with zero context as to why we're blocking, unacceptable, he says. So when you watch the other networks, they didn't even cover the story. Twitter blocked it. Facebook blocked it. The information's not out there unless you're watching us.
Yeah, well, the Senate Republicans should bring Jack Dorsey's, let's go with behind, before the Senate and ask him, what is your policy and how did it apply to this story? There's tons of stuff I see on Twitter and Facebook that has zero reliability and authenticity. This is a story from a major newspaper, and you're blocking access to it. That means you're an editor. That just means you're like Mother Jones. You're not a real platform. You're just another liberal editor. the Senate Republicans need to ask Jack Dorsey, what is your policy so we can decide whether or not we're going to start regulating this.
All right, Trey Gowdy, thanks so much. Definitely going to.
Thank you all.
Yeah, we're definitely going to stay on top of this and tap into you again. And of course, check out Trey's book. It is fantastic. We can weave it in. It is called Doesn't Hurt to Ask. Thanks, Trey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As coronavirus cases spike across the United States and certain states, our next guest is sharing his story of recovery from the virus in a new book, writing, quote, "Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard again the words of my living guardian angel, the shepherd of our flock, who watches over me and so many others. During challenging times, we should never feel sorry for ourselves. Jesus never felt sorry for himself. Despite the ravages that COVID-19 wreaked on my body, my mind, and my spirit, eventually my faith, my focus, and my fitness, with the help of hydroxychloroquine, saved me." Dan Venezia is a former professional baseball player, personal trainer, and author of a brand new book, Surviving COVID-19. Dan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, let's take you back to the spring. It was not a good time. It was on, ironically, Palm Sunday when you checked yourself into the hospital.
Palm Sunday, and as you just mentioned, luckily I held on to those words from my priest, and they were able to sustain me through the coming days. I had every symptom in the book: shivering, chills, shortness of breath. But on Palm Sunday, my breathing went from bad to worse. Felt like someone was sitting on my chest. And thankfully, I checked myself into the hospital, and it was a really rough ride, but we made it through.
When you're laying in the hospital bed like you were, and those were the early days, and at that point, the stories were that, if you got it and you wound up in a hospital, that could be it. That had to be going through your head at the time.
Absolutely. And I have experience as a life coach, so I knew the focus. I knew about fitness from my years as a professional athlete and as a trainer. And I needed to sort of get my mind in the right place and concentrate on what I could control.
Right.
Because this disease clearly took over my body. I'd lost 25 pounds. It tried to take over my mind, taking me to a very dark place, questioning the existence of God and so forth. But the one thing I did not let it break was my spirit.
And your spiritual life, because you say, really, this is a story about faith. You were worried about, what's going to happen to you next, and you didn't know. So who do you talk to? You talk to God.
Absolutely. And I had an army, Steve, of guardian angels, both living and dead, storming heaven's gates for me. I'll share one story that's in the book. My workout routine in the hospital consisted of my cardio, of a trip to the window and back. And I needed to rest after that. And I tried to turn the television off because they were spewing out the death toll numbers. They were talking about people like me, and that's when my mind started to drift. And instead of turning the television off, I pressed the channel up button by mistake, and I heard the words that our Father taught us to pray. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, and I opened my eyes, and there was this little old lady nun on the television. I learned later her name was Mother Angelica, and she was praying the Holy Rosary. And I prayed along with her. I believe God sent her to me at that moment, giving me that spiritual soul, that spiritual food that I needed for my soul to attack the next round of exercises. And there were so many prayers. When two or more come together to pray in Jesus' name for someone, there's power there. The Holy Spirit is present. And I had an army working for me. And I am so blessed to be here to share this story with the world.
Dan, when you were released from the hospital, they said, we've never had somebody in here only 4 days. Usually they're here for a much longer period of time and not always had good outcome. Why do you think you were able to get out so quickly? Because you were in great shape? Because they gave you these therapeutics, or what?
Well, several factors. For one, I spent a lifetime as a personal trainer, right? So I had the playbook there. I knew I needed to work my muscles out. And I also had the playbook in regards to getting my mind right, and then the prayer. But they gave me that hydroxychloroquine, and I was 11 days with fever for 103-degree fever for 11 straight days. And Tylenol did not help me at all. Within 24 hours, I took that, and my fever broke, and it hasn't been back since. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not a politician. I'm just a father. I'm a husband who desperately wanted to get home to his wife and to his two sons. And there's no doubt that I think that was a game changer for me. But faith, focus, fitness, and hydroxychloroquine. It's right there in the book. And I hope that this story will inspire others to sort of embrace God and embrace their faith a little bit more.
All right. These certainly are challenging times. He's also an author, brand new book. It's called Surviving COVID-19. Dan Venezia, a neighbor of mine in northern New Jersey. I am just learning from the card. Dan, thank you very much. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Steve.
All right. We'll see you later. Good luck to you. All right. 26 minutes before the top of the hour, coming up, Twitter and Facebook both facing backlash this morning by some for censoring the New York Post report on Hunter Biden's overseas business ties. Senator Mike Lee says the hypocrisy from big tech, unbelievable. He's next.
So what we see going on here is a blatant display of favoritism and of hypocrisy among these tech companies. It's deeply disturbing.
So just so you know, part of these emails, one of the references is on Hunter Biden talking about this Chinese energy firm. It says saying 10% for H for the big guy. So here it is. One email sent to Biden on May 13, 2017 with the subject line expectations. I go on, including details of, as we go ahead, remuneration packages for 6 people involved in an unspecified business venture. The email outlined a provisional agreement under which 80% of the equity or shares in the company would be split equally among those people whose initials corresponded to the sender, 3 recipients, with H apparently referring to Biden. So you wonder how far it goes up. It's not just Hunter Biden with a substance problem trying to cash in on his dad's name, which, as untasteful as it is, might be legal. It might be something else even more than that. And Senator Biden, Senator Lee, as you think about that, I also want to ask you, they said they reached out to your office with this information. Did you know that?
Yeah, that was news to me. I've learned that as of just the last few hours. I haven't been able to confirm that. We're coming through, as you might imagine, we receive tens of thousands of emails, and we haven't been able to verify that we heard from anybody on this, but we'll keep you posted on that.
But on the email, what do you think from what I just read to you?
It's stunning. Look, the fact that they did this, the fact that the New York Post put up this article yesterday, and then it was immediately taken down, and people who were posting it had their accounts blocked, is a rather brazen display and an almost inexplicable act of loyalty toward one presidential campaign and against another. I really would like some answers on this.
Well, the New York Post says, Senator, that they got the emails and the photographs, which nobody's ever seen before, clearly personal photographs of Hunter Biden, from Rudy, who is the president's attorney, and apparently through some channel, Rudy's lawyer got it. And so some people are going, well, don't you think that's just a little suspicious?
Well, suspicious or not, these things either are real emails or they're not. These events either transpired or they didn't. Now, look, you've had news media outlets and you've had social media platforms in the past who have been willing to run all sorts of stuff just based on somebody's suggestion that they might be true. Now, I just want to see them applying the same standard here that they've applied elsewhere, and clearly we're not having the same standards. It'll be interesting to see whether they apply the same standard today to today's story with regard to China in the New York Post that they applied yesterday with regard to the other Hunter Biden story.
All right, let's talk about the hearings yesterday. We were all glued to the TV. She seemed so measured and just thoughtful and extremely bright, obviously. #1 in her class, Notre Dame. So let me show you, we put together a montage of some of the Democrats' bizarre questioning. Watch.
Roe a super precedent.
How would you define super precedent?
I thought someday I'd be sitting in that chair. I'm not. I'm up here, so I'm asking you.
You condemn white supremacy, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors?
No, Senator Hirono.
Do you believe that climate change is happening?
I will not express a view on a matter of public policy.
People are listening and watching. They may see what you say and be deterred from using contraceptives, or may feel the fear that it could be banned.
I would be surprised if people were afraid that birth control was about to be criminalized.
And then Senator Kennedy, just to demonstrate how bizarre some of these questions were, he eventually asked her, "Do you hate warm puppies?" And then she laughed and said no. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I'm experiencing PTSD as I listen to these clips, having experienced them once already. I thought they were strange. Look, here's one way to make sense of them, though. You can understand why these individuals would ask such bizarre questions if you understand the way they've come to view the Supreme Court of the United States. They view it as a policy-making body. They view it as a political entity. And when you understand it that way, it makes some sense out of why they're asking that. There's only one problem with that. The Constitution doesn't make it that. It doesn't make it a policy body. It doesn't make it a representative organ of the federal government. It is instead a dispute resolution mechanism within the federal government, there to just interpret the law where people disagree as to its meaning.
So, Senator, you have PTSD on those questions. I have on the Kavanaugh after his hearings were done. That's when the controversy started. What should our viewers know that could happen next that could turn this very smooth, polite process on its head? One thing I heard about is not giving you guys the quorum you need to have 2 Democrats show up in committee and 2 show up on a House on the floor vote. What else? Do you know this law as well as anyone?
Look, Brian, I'm not going to show our cards right now, but let me just say this. If they pull that trick, we've got 10 other tricks up our sleeve ready to go on that. They're not going to deter us. We're going to get Amy Coney Barrett confirmed. We're not going to let them pull a Kavanaugh or any other form of trick here that would deter us from getting her confirmed. This is happening.
Because you are the majority, and that's kind of how it works regarding these things. Senator Mike Lee, sir, thank you very much for joining us today. Good luck today.
Thank you.
All right.
Watching the forecast. Hey, JD.
Speaking of heat across California, we're concerned because they're going to have rolling blackouts in areas that are going to feel temperatures in the 90s, close to 100 degrees off California. And not only today, but through Friday and into the weekend, where we have heat advisories posted for most of the coastal areas across California. So a big concern out there. Not only that, of course, the wildfire danger, the heat, the dry conditions, as well as some gusty winds. Areas that are getting some rain in the forecast across the eastern half of the country as this cold front moves through and brings much cooler temperatures than we've seen over the last few weeks. Temperatures in the 30s and 40s. They're your forecast highs today across the northern plains, the Great Lakes, and the Midwest. And then that cold front is going to sink as far south as the deep south, where places like Atlanta, Georgia are going to be in the 60s and the 70s. So they will enjoy some refreshing temperatures, but the heat is still going to remain a story across portions of California and the Southwest. Steve Ainsley Bryan, back to you.
All right, Janice, but they know what they're getting into when they move there. They move with tank tops for a reason. Meanwhile, straight ahead, monster